Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namasami. We'll have a couple of readings today. The first one's a very short one, and this is the last in the series of 3 called The Monastery as a Teacher, and this one is subtitled The Samana and Society. And the word samana is a Pali word for a monastic or a religious seeker, one who's entered the holy life, a recluse or a wanderer. The teachings of the Buddha are teachings that help us to understand ourselves. Though it's quite possible for us to do this on our own, I really doubt whether I would be able to do it. So I'm quite grateful to have an established form and convention to use as a guide in order to understand my emotions, memories and habits. Being committed to the convention of a samana means giving myself to it voluntarily. It's something for which I feel gratitude and respect, so I stay within the limitations that it places on me. Katanyuta, gratitude, arises in the mind. I remember the tremendous feeling of gratitude that arose in me towards Thanajan Cha and Thai society when I realized they had provided me with the occasion and the support to live like this and to understand myself. When you realize the wonder of that, you gladly live within the conventions. You want to perfect them and be worthy as a way of offering something to those who have supported you. So you integrate into society by living the Dhamma and presenting this model to others. An alms mendicant is also one who gives occasion for others to give alms. This is different from being a beggar going around scrounging off the neighbours. A lot of people think we're just a bunch of beggars. Why don't they get out and work? They probably laze around Chithurst House just waiting for someone to come along and feed them. Why don't they go out and get a job? Do something important. But an alms mendicant gives occasion for others to give the alms that are necessary for existence, such as food, robes, shelter and medicine. We don't need very much, and we have to live quite humbly and impeccably so that we are worthy of alms. We reflect, am I worthy of this? Have I been living honestly and rightly within the discipline? Because people give not to us as personalities, but to the Sangha which lives following the teaching of the Buddha. This monastery is dependent on alms. There are no fees for staying. People offer what they choose. If it was an institution based on fees, we wouldn't really be samanas anymore. We'd be businessmen, making a business out of teaching the Dhamma which has been freely given to us. A country like this is regarded as a good and benevolent country, but it's become too bureaucratic and too materialistic. Here in Europe, people have lost that katanyuta. We've become very demanding, always complaining and wanting things to be better and better, even though we don't really need such high standards. As samanas, we give occasion for people to offer what they can, and that has a good effect on us, as well as on society. When you open up the opportunity in society for people to give things, when you open up the opportunity in society for people to give 2 things that they respect and love, this gives people a lot of happiness and joy. But a tyrannical society where we're constantly trying to squeeze out everything that we can get is a miserable and depressed society. So in Britain now, we as monks and nuns make ourselves worthy of love and respect. People make offerings, and more people experience the arising of faith. More people come and listen. They want to practice the Dhamma and have the occasion to go forth. So this was given in the early days of Chithurst, and this reference that Lumpur Sumedho makes about when he had this feeling of gratitude towards Lumpur Cha was in about 1973 or 74. He had requested the opportunity to go to India to visit the Buddhist holy places. And during that time, a number of other Westerners had been showing up at Wat Pah, and the responsibility of being a teacher, being a translator for them, fell to Ajahn Sumedho, being the first one who was along. He spoke Thai better than most of the others, and he was the most experienced, so he ended up having to be responsible for this whole crowd of slightly wacky and unruly Westerners who showed up wanting to become Buddhist monks. And even though there's some pretty interesting characters around now, capital I, interesting, there are very, very large capital I interesting characters around in those days. And so it was quite a job. And so Luang Por Sumedho was quite stressed at the responsibility of having to look after these and be available to help take care of these other Westerners, and even to the point where Ajahn Chah would send a whole group of them off to this branch monastery up at Tam Sang Phet in one of the provinces just a couple of hundred kilometers or so north of Ubon. And Ajahn Sumedho was supposed to be looking after them there, and then a few of the monks got into all kinds of tangles and troubles. And so that there was this very strong feeling in Luang Por Sumedho, I've had enough of this, I don't want to be around these crazy people, I'm out of here. And so he made the sort of first possible excuse he could manage, and so Luang Por, I'd like to go on Tudong, or it's a really good place in central Thailand where I can go and practice by myself. So anyway, Luang Por Chah let him go off on a long lead, and it was during that time when you hear Luang Por Sumedho talking about when he went off to stay in this in this ruined Khmer temple on an island in the Gulf of Thailand. It had this underground room which was like a perfect sensory deprivation chamber. He thought, this is fantastic. This is just what I've been looking for. It's there's this one small village on the island. I can go arms around every day. No one's going to drop in and visit me. I can sit in my beautiful, dark, quiet, silent room and meditate. Yes! And so he had it all set up to go and live in this perfect environment for his meditation without any other crazy foreigners around. And then he got cellulitis in his leg. And so he had these terrible fevers and was laid up in hospital and had to spend about a month in hospital, I think, and then the rest of the Rains Retreat living in this really dingy and crowded, noisy monastery in the middle of the town where the hospital was. So that wasn't the perfect retreat situation. But he didn't want to go back to Wat Pah, so I believe that very shortly after that he picked up the opportunity to go to India. And he was travelling there with Ajahn Bankau and another English monk, Chris Cook, Dhammaguto, I think was his Pali name, and travelling around India, living on alms and visiting the Buddhist holy places. They didn't have a layman travelling with them, it was just living on whatever was offered in India. And so they had about 6 or 7 months travelling there at that time. And it was during that period when this wave of intense gratitude welled up and hit him. And he could, I think and when he's described it, he said he would hear these memories of these internal voices of like, I've had enough of these stupid people. Why do I have to take responsibility? I don't care. I don't care about them. I want to meditate. What about my practice? And he heard this sort of whining, complaining voice in his head. And he thought, do I really want my life to be guided by this character? And then he realized that kind of in a flash, all that had been given to him, how every day the people were coming to the monastery preparing food, offering food. Ajahn Chah was always available, day and night to offer guidance, and was there as a helpful teacher and mentor at all times. And he was just suddenly overwhelmed by this feeling of gratitude, like, wow, well, I've taken this so much for granted. I just assumed it was all there for me. But really, this is quite amazing. This is miraculous. What a wonderful thing. And it was a very non-rational experience. It wasn't a kind of weighing up of the pros and cons, like, okay, well, there's so much responsibility over here, but I get so much benefit over there. It wasn't that way at all. It was rather just like being hit by this huge wave of katanyata, of gratitude. And so in other places he also describes it in more detail, where after he came back from India, then rather than trying to seek solitude for himself or get away from the responsibility, he just offered his life to Ajahn Chah. So whatever you want me to do, Luang Por, I'll do it. Just, and there's he mentions in a later talk, there's this notoriously awful branch monastery called Wat Suan Gloy, which means the banana garden. But it was very ungarden-like, and there were almost no bananas there either. And it was really kind of hot and dusty, and the trees were all about 5 feet tall. It was a pretty grim place. So it was like the kind of hardship post being sent to Suan Gloy. And so he said, I'll go to Suan Gloy if you like. And Luang Por said, no, that's all right. And then what happened was a few months later, then the conditions came together, and Wat Pananachat, the monastery for Westerners, got started, and then he was a natural person to be leading that. But this was the incident or the occasion that arose was when he was living in India and traveling on Tudong. So just as we were saying yesterday, how even after 2,500 years, it's astonishing how so many aspects of our life and training still fit together with society, and living as an alms mendicant also works. And many people feel like it's impossible to, even other Buddhist monastics, you meet many other people who've been training in different disciplines and different groups around the world. And so it's impossible to live without money. You have to use money as a Buddhist monastic. And they're amazed that when you say, no, I haven't used money since 1978. What? How can that be? And they assume that you have to make that compromise, but it's not so. That you can live on alms. And also that we go out on alms round fairly regularly in different monasteries, and go and just receive the offerings of strangers, also traveling through the countryside, on walking on Tudong for weeks or months at a time, traveling through towns where they've never really seen Buddhist monastics before, and still being able to live on the offerings that are made by strangers, living on the kindness of strangers, inspired by the model of a wandering monastic. So that one other thing maybe to mention on that was when they first came to London, and Ajahn Chah made it clear very soon that he had confidence in the group that was there, and that it was worthwhile for Ajahn Sumedho and the others to stay on. Because originally the plan was that they would just be there for 2 or 3 months, and they would all go back to Thailand in July of 77. And after 2 weeks of being in Britain, Ajahn Chah said, "Okay, Sumedho, you stay, and I'll go back in July. You and Tan Khema Dhammo can stay here, and I'll go back." So he said, "Well, what about Wat Pananachat? We just started this new place." He said, "It's all right. Someone else will look after it. The forest will take care of itself." And so they ended up staying, but they were a little bit uncertain how it was all going to work. And so, we're in England, and once you're gone, then a lot of people are going to you're not going to be coming because you're the attractive, famous teacher. How are we going to manage? Should we put up posters and advertise ourselves, or should we kind of run courses and charge money? And Ajahn Chah said, no, don't do any of that. He said, if you make good soup, people get to hear about it. You don't have to advertise. You don't need to put up the kind of notices in the magazines or little posters stick them on the telegraph poles or in the newsagent. No, if what you're doing is worthwhile, people will show up. And it was also one of the things that was very striking to them. He was very adaptable. He said, you can change the way you do the chanting, you can change the way you arrange the pujas and such like. He had already suggested wearing the robes over both shoulders rather than having a bare shoulder because the climate was so cold. And he said, you can change the chanting, you can change the routines and this, but he said one thing you must do is you have to go out on alms round every day. And he was extremely insistent on that. And they thought, well, why? I mean, you're happy to adapt all these other things, but who's going to offer us any alms food walking through the streets of Hampstead? And he was really like, no, you have to go every day. And he was very, very strong on that. And so Luang Por asked him, well, why is this so important? I forget exactly how he just reported it as being said, but there was a couple of things mainly. He said, firstly, it's your duty as monks to be the heavenly messenger. You're the fourth heavenly messenger, the religious seeker. That's the heavenly messenger that caused the bodhisattva to go forth and to enter into monastic life. So your job as monks is to fly the banner of the arahants, to fly the Buddhist flag, and to be seen. So it doesn't matter if people haven't got a clue that you're Buddhists or don't know anything about Buddhism. Just seeing a peaceful person walking along the street, and they'll know it's got something to do with the religion, and it's something that is to do with renunciation, and so that's an important symbol. So you have to go every day. And besides, if you don't go out every day, you guys will kill each other. It's cooped up in this little vihara because you're weird. You're in England and you're weird. You're men dressed in these brown sheets and skirts and with no hair, and so you're strange. And so no one likes to look strange. So what you'll tend to do is to stay cooped up in your little house because you don't want to go outside and look weird, and then you'll end up killing each other. Yeah, or at least you go arguing, because you'll all get sort of wrapped up in each other, and it'll lead to conflict and tension. So you need to get out. So he was very practical on that score, and so that became very much part of our life. And so in London in those days, and then in the early days of Chithurst, even though we had a huge amount of work to be doing on the house, the place was out of 22 rooms, only 4 were habitable when we first went there. The place was filled with dry rot, and we had to kind of refurbish the whole house. Still, a few of the monks would go out on alms round every day. Every single day, a few of us would go out in the morning time, just usually walking through the country lanes and around the footpaths, and it was almost never did anybody give us any food. Only if you went to visit some local people that knew us, but otherwise just being out and about, walking around. And it was true that we would hear from local farmers when we did a winter retreat time, and we stopped going on alms round for a couple of months. They say, "Oh, where have you been? I haven't seen you for a long time. Where you? I thought you were all gone." And that just seeing us tromping through the fields and getting getting all mud spattered and walking through the lanes was inspiring, even to the local farmers and villagers, even though they never visited or didn't know what we were about. So that sign of the samana, the wandering seeker, is something that that Ajahn Chah saw was very important, and not just for your own training, but also as a connection to the greater society. So I'll go on to the next one. So this is chapter 8, which is patience. And this again is a talk given at Chithurst back in those early days. Patience is a virtue that is highly praised within Buddhist circles, but not considered so terribly important in a materialistic world, where efficiency and getting what we want instantly are far more desirable. With all the instant things that are produced now, as soon as we feel a desire, a need for something, we can get it quickly. And if we can't get it quickly, we become very annoyed or upset and complain. And this was in about 1981, so nowadays it's even quicker. Much quicker. If we can't get it quickly, we become very annoyed or upset and complain. This country's going to the dogs. We hear that all the time. Complaining because if people are going on strike or aren't efficient enough, quick enough to satisfy our desires, we have to wait and patiently endure. Notice in sitting how impatient you become when pain arises in your body, and how you automatically try to get away from the pain. If you have a fever or fall sick, notice how you resent the inconvenience, the annoyance of the body, and try to get well, to get away from the pain as soon as possible. The virtue of patience is probably the most important one for us to consider at this time, because if you don't have patience, spiritual development is an impossibility. So I might think, I'll take the instant Zen practice. I don't want to be bothered with that Theravada because it takes so long. I want to be enlightened instantly, quickly. So I don't have to wait around doing boring things, doing things that take time, and which I may not feel like doing. Maybe I can take a course or take a pill, have some kind of machine to get enlightened quickly. I remember that when LSD first became known, people said it was the quick way to enlightenment. You just swallow this tablet and you understand everything. You don't have to bother with ordination as a monk and sit around in a monastery. Just take a pill and you'll be enlightened. Go to the chemist or the dope peddler and you don't have to commit yourself to anything. Wouldn't that be wonderful? If that was all one had to do. But after a few trips on LSD, people began to realize that the enlightening experience seemed to disappear, and they were left in an even worse state than ever. In a monastery, the development of patience is part of our way of life. In the forest monasteries of northeast Thailand, you have the possibility to become very patient, because there life is much less efficient, and you have to endure. You have to endure through all kinds of unpleasant physical experiences, such as malarial fevers and the hot season. The hot season in northeast Thailand is one of the dreariest things I've experienced in my life. You wake up in the morning and think, not another day. Everything seems so dreary. You think, another hot day, an endless day of heat and mosquitoes and sweat. A seemingly endless day, and one day after another. And then you remind yourself, what a wonderful opportunity for developing patience. You hear about modern American ways to enlightenment, where you can become involved in the most interesting kinds of personal relationships and in scientific experiments, doing absolutely fascinating things to each other, and be enlightened. And here you are, sitting in the hot season, in an endless, hot, dreary day, in which 1 hour seems like an eternity. You think, what am I doing here? I could be in California, having a fascinating life, doing fascinating things, becoming enlightened quicker and more efficiently. California is much more advanced and with it than northeast Thailand. What am I doing here? Sweating through my robes, being bitten by mosquitoes. But then you think, I'm developing patience. If I just learn to be patient in this lifetime, I've not wasted it. Just to be a little more patient is good enough. I won't go to California, get caught up in those fascinating encounter groups, modern therapies and scientific experiments. I'll just sit here and learn to be patient with a mosquito biting my arm. Learn to be patient with an endless, dreary hot season that seems to go on forever. Incidentally, Wat Bapong was also incredibly dreary by design. There's the kind of bleakness, somehow sort of an engineered bleakness in the whole forest there. I don't know how the Ajahn Chah does it, but it's a kind of somehow there's a sort of stark and sort of frillless quality. It doesn't have any charm. Well, there's a little bit more charming now. They've got chandeliers in the sala. But in the old days, it was totally charmless, bleak, baking. I also used to think, my mind is too alert and bright. I've got so much restless movement in my mind. Because I'd always wanted to have an interesting personality, I trained myself in that direction and acquired all sorts of useless information and silly ideas so I could be a charming, entertaining person. But that doesn't really count. It's useless in a monastery in northeast Thailand. When you're alone with nobody to charm, that mental habit just goes around in your mind and nothing's fascinating anymore. Instead of becoming fascinating and charming, I could see there was no point in that, I started looking at the water buffaloes and wondering what went on in their minds. A Thai water buffalo is one of the most stupid-looking creatures in the world. It's a big, clumsy thing and it has the dullest-looking face. I think, that's what I need. To sit in my kuti, sweating through my robes, trying to imagine what a water buffalo is thinking. So I sit and create in my mind an image of a water buffalo becoming more stupid, more dull, more patient, and less of a fascinating, clever, and interesting personality. Learn to be more patient with things as they are, with yourself, your hang-ups, your obsessive thoughts, your restless mind, and with the way things are externally. Like here at Chithurst. How many of you are really patient with Chithurst? I hear some of you complaining that you have to work too hard, or there's not enough of this, or you want more time, or you want... There are too many people, not enough privacy. The mind goes on and on. There's always somewhere better. But patience means that you endure through the way things are right now. How many of you would be willing to sit through a hot season in northeast Thailand, or endure patiently through a year of having some tropical disease without wanting to go home and have mother take care of you? We still have the hope that eventually enlightenment will make us a more interesting with-it person than an unenlightened being. If you could just become enlightened, you could surely increase the feeling of self-importance. But the Buddha wisdom is a very humbling wisdom, and it takes a great deal of patience to be wise like Buddha. Buddha wisdom isn't a particularly fascinating kind of wisdom. It's not like being a nuclear physicist, a psychiatrist, or a philosopher. Buddha wisdom is very humbling because it knows that whatever arises passes away and is not self. It knows that whatever condition of the body and mind arises, it is conditioned. And it knows the unconditioned as the unconditioned. But is knowing the unconditioned very interesting or fascinating? Try to think of knowing the unconditioned. Would that be interesting? You might think, I'd like to know God or the Dhamma. That would be a really fascinating thing to know, something blissful and ecstatic. So you look into your meditation for that kind of experience. You think that getting high is getting close. But the unconditioned is as interesting as the space in this room. Is the space in this room very interesting to look at? It isn't to me. The space in this room is like the space in the other rooms. The things in this room might be interesting or uninteresting, or whatever, good, bad, beautiful, ugly, but the space, what is it? There's nothing you can really say or think about it. It has no quality except being spatial. And to be able really to be aware of space, one has to be patient. As there is nothing one can grasp, one recognizes space in the room only by not clinging to the objects in it. When you let go, when you stop your absorptions in the beings and the things in the room, along with the judgments, criticisms and evaluations of them, you begin to experience its space. But that takes a lot of patience and humility. With conceit and pride, we can form all our opinions about the room. Whether we like the Buddha image or not, or the picture at the back, or the colour of the walls, whether we think the photograph of Ajahn Mun is an inspiring one, or the photograph of Ajahn Chah. But when we just sit here in the space, the body starts becoming painful. We become restless or sleepy. Then we endure, we watch, and we listen. We listen to the mind, its complaining, the fears, the doubts and the worries, not in order to come up with some interesting, fascinating conclusions about ourselves as being anything, but just as a mere recognition, a bare recognition that all that arises passes away. Buddha wisdom is just that much, knowing the conditioned as the conditioned and the unconditioned as the unconditioned. Buddhas rest in the unconditioned, and unless it's necessary, no longer to seek. Buddhas rest in the unconditioned, and, unless it's necessary, no longer seek absorption into anything. They're no longer deluded by any conditions, and they incline to the unconditioned, the space, the emptiness, rather than towards the changing conditions within the space. In your meditation now, as you incline towards the emptiness of the mind, towards the space in the mind, your habitual grasping, fascination, revulsion, fears, doubts and worries about these conditions lessen. They're not self, nothing to be excited about or depressed about. They are as they are. You begin to recognize that conditions are just things that come and go, and that's why we can allow them to be just as they are. Their nature is to go away, so we don't have to make them do so. We're free, and patient and enduring enough to allow things to take their natural course. In this way we liberate ourselves from the struggle, strife and confusion of the ignorant mind, which has to spend all its time evaluating and discriminating, trying to hold on, or get rid of something. So reflect on what I've said, and take all the time in the world to endure the unendurable. What seems to be unendurable is endurable if you're patient. Be patient with others and with the world as it is, rather than always dwelling on what's wrong with it and how you'd like it to be if you had your way. Remember that the world happens to be as it is, and right now, that's the only way it can be. The only thing we can do is be patient with it. That doesn't mean that we approve or like it any better, but it does mean we can exist in it peacefully, rather than complaining, rebelling, and causing more friction and confusion, adding to the confusion through believing in our own confusion. So this is a famous, not exactly metaphor, but example of Luang Por Sumedho's, the embodying the mind of the water buffalo. They're getting more and more rare nowadays, and they're being replaced by these, what they call the iron buffalo, like a little sort of motorized plough that people use now. So actual water buffaloes are becoming a bit of a rare species. But when you do meet them, they do have this very extraordinarily placid, uncomplicated quality. But it's also, you can see how Luang Por Sumedho is very sort of actively reflecting on his mind and his conditioning, and recognizing all those years I was trying to be this fascinating, dazzling character in Berkeley, trying to impress people and charm my friends at parties. It's the karmic result of all of that is just still rattling around, trying to charm the four walls of my kuti. Yeah, this is not much point, and so that way of counterbalancing that, just to sort of calm everything down, and also that sense of I want quicker, faster. I want it bigger, faster, better, and to lean against that and to say, well, why do I have to have everything bigger, faster, better? Why can't I just go at this speed? Why do I have to have something that's somehow it gives me a special advantage, or is somehow the short way? I remember one time at a conference with the Dalai Lama, and somebody asked the question, what's the quick way to enlightenment? Yeah. What's the quickest way to enlightenment? And he started to answer the question in a sort of systematic way, like talking about different methods. And after about, it was very powerful, because after about 2 or 3 minutes, he just stopped and then burst into tears. He started crying, and then he said, "I can't answer this question. This is because this question, it just displays this such a completely wrong attitude. It's not about trying to save time. It's not about trying to do things in a way so you don't have to bother. That's complete. That whole way of thinking is completely against the Dharma." It was really there was 5,000 people in the hall. And it really got everyone's attention, because it was so sincere that that he started giving a sort of stock answer, and then something in him just snapped. Like, no, it's not about being bigger, faster, better. It's not about cutting corners and getting a biofeedback machine that'll tell you what your brainwaves are doing, or taking a trip through an MRI scanner to map which brainwaves you need to develop, and or taking some drug, but in exactly the same kind of principle. Just what you need in order to develop spiritually is it takes time, and it takes sacrifice. It takes a quality of self-surrender, rather than me trying to get somewhere quickly, me trying to get what I want sooner rather than later. And during this time, there was this advert that was circulating around Chithurst, and it was for American Express. I think it was from a Time magazine, and the slogan was "Take the waiting out of wanting." Take the waiting out of wanting. So it's like you can get it immediately. American Express. As soon as you want it, you can get it. And nowadays, of course, everything gets. You can download things through your iPad or your iPhone, and you get all your different items sort of delivered to your gadget or through Amazon. Now they're talking about developing these things being delivered by little personal quadricopters. So you have a little drone that will bring you, you order something on Amazon and a little drone will bring it to your door in half an hour. Really, within 3 or 4 years, they're talking about having so you could order a new microwave oven from Amazon and lands at your doorstep. You don't even have to wait for a delivery truck. Instead, a little drone or a quadricopter comes in and delivers it to your address. So it's going to be even less waiting. But this presents a very beautiful picture of this quality of in a way tapping into that, like I was saying yesterday about with the 8 precepts. It's in a way tapping into that in us which is already full. That patience is about letting go of time, because also the English word patience and the way that we tend to relate to it culturally is gritting your teeth and waiting for this nasty thing to be over, and when it's over then you'll be happy, right? Like being patient. Okay. So you grit your teeth and wait for it all to be over. But the patience which is really talked about here, which is the real paramita, which is the means of transcendence, is the patience which lets go of time. Like you're not waiting for the dreary afternoon in the hot season to be over. You're not waiting for the hot season to finish, because waiting is suffering, you might have noticed. And so you can be simply being there, but not waiting. The waiting is as an attitude of, won't this be good when it's all over? And that true patience, the patience which is liberating, is letting go of time, not waiting for this to be over so we can get to that. But it's like a surrender to this. Even though it might be a particularly bleak day in the hot season or a bleak winter's day with the English non-weather. It's been a bit more sort of dramatic with all the wind and rain recently, but England has a wonderful line in kind of what we call non-weather. Sort of grey, bland, nothing very much of anything. Just marvellous. And that that can be similarly trying to one's patience, but also just that not waiting for the winter to be over, not waiting for the spring to come, not waiting for the sun to come out, or not waiting for the skies to turn blue or the flowers to come up, but just, here it is. Grey, soggy, bland. Fine. So, what else was there to talk about? There was okay, well, I'll leave the comments there for the time being. If there's anything people would like to ask about or comment, clarify, please fire away. Yes, Mike.
Not really very spiritual observation, but yes, water buffaloes. Absolutely, but when you see wild buffalo in Southeast Asia or nature reserve in India, very different animal. They've sort of been bred to be the wild ones, so don't mess with them.
Yes, well, in the monastery where Luang Por Sumedho is living now, they have quite a few wild ones that roam through the monastery. They're big.
Yeah.
And you don't mess with them. Yeah. They're called krating in Thai. and so that the one monk who was from the northeast was staying there, a Thai monk, and he was very keen to meet one. And he did. And he got knocked over by it. And when he was on his arms round, he oh wow! I think that it was because he was so sort of excited and agitated that it took one look at him and knocked him over. He survived. He had a trip to the hospital.
That's it.
Ajahn, do you think that when we develop such a paramita like passing, this is coming all together with develop another like kindness, like generosity, like forgiveness. I mean, passing in itself is you have to work in all the whole thing, in the keep. No. For example, you want to be kind, but you have to be passing as well. No? I think. No?
Yeah, I think it's also interesting in a few of the later talks I noticed, because I've been proofreading the whole book, that Luang Por Sumedho uses the term patient kindness as a translation for the word metta, rather than loving kindness. He says patient kindness, I think for exactly that kind of reason, because there's a whole complex of those qualities together. So to be patient, there also has to be that kind of a quality of sympathy for the situation and other people around you. There needs to be that, along with that, letting go of restlessness. There's a kind of also forgiveness. I think you mentioned the way you're not carrying around any grudges or negativity. So all of that is involved in it. Yes.
A comment yesterday about surrendering to the moment that's been sort of repeated again today. And I've been looking at it and finding that that's actually very, very hard to do. But the idea of surrendering to a present moment, really interesting looking at it that way.
Yes, because the mind is always creating time, and that the one of these themes of Luang Por Sumedho, right now it's like this. This is the way it is, and as he says at the end of that, and right now this is the only way it can be. Which doesn't mean that we become passive, but it's just right now it's like this, and you're not waiting for it to turn into something else. But it's in a way you're pushing against the whole current of habit from a lifetime of trying to get somewhere else or on the way to something else, and to just that sense of surrender, like no, it's this, it's this moment. There's also an interesting way that Ajahn Chah defined what a samana is, like a religious seeker. He said a samana is one who has no future. So you just take that as a little theme. A religious seeker is someone who has no future. And just listen to that thing in your mind that goes, eek! But I've got plans. I'm an anagarika. I'm on my way. I have over there's something better, different. And that even if what is over there, often the imagined future is something that's got some promise to it, or there's something that's good. It's that sense of a person locked in time, like a me here that's existing on a timeline of past, present, and future. Then you already created a false image. So just that, I found that phrase of Ajahn Chah's, that a samana is one who has no future. Just taking that and sitting with it, because it holds up a mirror to that. But I've got, what about all the things I think that I am in the middle of, and I'm heading towards, or I'm looking forward to, or I'm dreading, and just to keep no. And the renunciation of a samana, you tend to think of it as being shaving your head or or not wearing colourful clothes, or the other renunciate practices. But in that saying, the renunciation is the renunciation of time, not having a future. So it's like a surrendering to this present reality. Almost more challenging than taking your hair off. Right?
If you look at it in a deeper sense, actually samana is working towards having no future because of enlightenment. But if you look at it in a deeper, different way, about the immediate future. So actually, it is quite inspiring as well, I thought.
Yes. I was thinking more of it on a moment-to-moment basis rather than after the end of rebirth. But it works both ways. But also to look at that in us which is threatened by the idea of having no future. Let's go, can we negotiate, or can I have a nice long stint in heaven before I have no future, please?
I was a bit surprised that the talk was from 81, that people still didn't have patience at that time. And I just was wondering, is that something...
Were you even born then?
Just one day, I guess. It's the year of birth. And I just wonder, is that... I think the talk was given in this place, we say in the West, or in London, or in
Chithurst, yeah.
Chithurst. And is that something... it's like a theme here because of the conditions here that people are less patient. I was just wondering, was that in Thailand different or the same, or different and the same?
Well, nowadays it's very similar. Even in northeast Thailand, rural Thailand, it's things caught up with the sort of agitated, time-bound ethic. Whereas before it was, one of the things going arms around in the villages of northeast Thailand, you really could, walking through the village barefoot in the early morning, you think, this could be India 2,000 years ago. I mean, there's nothing that you're seeing around you that wouldn't have been in anywhere in Asia or Southern Asia 2,000 years before. Just wooden houses up on stilts, people with their dogs and chickens. Banana plants and little betel nut trees, and dirt pathway through the village, rice fields. Just nothing had changed, and it was just the same. Like subsistence farming, they didn't really use any money. It was like a non-money economy, just subsistence farming, and that's how most people live. So that's very different now. So. I think the fields around Wat Pananachat now, the rice fields, there's something like 1 million baht a rai, so like 2.2 million baht for an acre, which is when I was first there 35 years ago, that would be an inconceivable quantity of money. Like a field would maybe be like 5,000 baht for a rai, about a fifth of an acre. And so, and there's kind of the highway is all paved. They have factories and shops and such all the way along the road now. So that modern paced life has really filled all the different corners of Asia, and then back in the city, like in Bangkok. It probably even moves faster than London or Paris or Rome. So that speediness, and also just the whole conditioning of society. I think everywhere it's revs up. This gets faster and faster, and particularly now the number of choices that people have, the amount of information that people can receive, amount of different things that people can fill their minds with just escalates day by day. So that the end result is that people get more and more impatient, and so that problems like attention deficit disorder, ADHD, becomes sort of endemic. Something like 25% or 30% of American children are diagnosed with having attention deficit disorder. And I'm not a child psychologist, a psychiatrist, but my diagnosis is that most of it's coming from having just this blizzard of entertainment, information, and stuff going on through the TV, or video games, and various devices. So that and when you see films or programs and such like for kids nowadays, just an image hardly you get 4 or 5 images per second. So that kind of colourful, mobile. I mean, just watching the kids here. Like little kids. I mean, they're all on their iPhones or their iPads. The mum's sort of sitting there doing the water pouring, and the kids can. Like I was saying the other day, there was one. She had her headphones on and her iPod while she was going to help mum offer the alms food. Couldn't even, like a 3-year-old, literally. She's like this big. Couldn't even take the headphones off and put the iPod down to go and help offer the alms food. So the end result of that is decreasing patience, because that sort of level of stimulation is taken as normal, and anything less than that blizzard of information and stimulation is experienced as boring. So then it becomes more and more important, helpful to develop patience, particularly for the younger generation, because so much of the current of conditioning is going against that. So and ways to not have to bother waiting. Like there's this very interesting little interview with an American. I think he's a comedian or a TV personality, and he was talking about why he wouldn't give his children, his teenage kids, he wouldn't give them a smartphone. And he said, "I want them to be able to be bored. I want them to be able to be unhappy." And there was this interview with an American sort of chat show host, and he said, "Well, why don't you like your kids?" He said, "Well, it's because I love my children. I want them to be able to be bored." Because what happens nowadays, as soon as you feel mildly uncomfortable, or you're slightly stressed or slightly awkward, you get out your phone, you check your messages, you go and look at something, you take your mind away. So we never let ourselves be uncomfortable, we never let ourselves be bored, we never have to wait for anything, we're just always just filling the mind with some other thing. So he said, I feel that's a disservice to my children to not give them that opportunity.
Although Ajahn, I don't think he will be successful, because actually he will make them less bored and more happy. Because it's interesting what you're saying. I mean, it's more like a linguistic thing, I think, because I've just come lately and I see in my life this big contrast of how actually much more bored and unhappy I was outside, because I had so many things. Mm-hmm. So you get so bored so quickly. So if I kind of just do little statistics all through the day, I'm much more kind of less bored and happy, even that I do less things. Outside it came really quickly, because you can do something, but at the same time, in that moment, I'm bored again. And then next, bored again. Yeah.
Well, also in the way that Luang Por Sumedho is talking about that, saying that using the hot season, or he's saying monastic life is really boring. It's like, yes, it is, but it's also, when you really surrender to the moment, then it's kind of boring, but it's not. It's plain, or it's simple, but you begin to see that boredom is totally related to the sense of self. If there's no sense of self, it's impossible to be bored. There might not be much going on, but it's not boring. And as long as there's a strong sense of me, then that feeds the feeling of boredom. And so that I think what you're saying is true, but just giving people the opportunity to let them be still or be quiet and not get away, then there's a sort of and then there's a time of resistance. But when you let go, then you've learned how to be happy in your own company, learn how to be to be mindful of an awkward feeling. This is something I consciously develop. Mindfulness of awkward feeling. Very important skill. So that you don't immediately try and get away from it, but just like, well, this is really exactly what I was planning not to happen. Right. This is a very awkward feeling. And then just not doing anything with it. It takes a lot of effort, but it's great. I highly recommend it. Mindfulness of awkward feeling. And you realize, I don't have to fix this or change it or get away from it or do something. It's actually just what it is. That's all. Where when you're invested in changing things, and people are conditioned to, well, get away from this, don't tolerate that, then, and the capacity to get away, you have like 16 different choices of how to get away from it. Then of course the mind takes the path of least resistance and does that, and doesn't choose to just say, well, this is exactly what I didn't have planned. We escape from it. So I feel, particularly for the younger generation, when you see how totally wedded to their devices even the little kids are, it's and sometimes you have this kind of negotiation that's going on. The mother's saying, like, just while they're doing the chanting, put it down. And one little boy is carrying his iPad up to I don't want to put it down, just to help with the food offering. Yeah, and I'm sure it's not just happening here; it's everywhere. And I'm not a Luddite, I'm not sort of anti-technology, but I do see that what happens is that you're developing a level of addiction and habituation, and that the end result is less patience and more boredom and more stress. And so that becomes more important to be able to have no connection. Those of you who are struggling with Wi-Fi, absence of connections at Amravati, it's a marvelous opportunity to be not connected.
You're saying, it seems to be something in humans, a distraction, infinite distraction, or watching TV, reading a book, and listening to the radio at the same time.
Yes, yeah.
Which I find myself doing is ridiculous. Yeah.